So I've just built the ultimate lead generation agent and I'm super excited to share it with you. Generate a list of leads for founders of marketing agencies in London, United Kingdom, Chicago, United States, and Sydney, Australia. So as you guys can see, the AI agent runs, boom. And just like that, the AI agent responds with, I've added 272 new contacts for founders of marketing agencies in London, United Kingdom, Chicago, United States, and Sydney, Australia. And if we open up the Google Sheets that we've connected to the agent, you can see that now we have a list of 272 different founders for marketing agencies. And if we take a look at the actual location, you can see that the location is in line with what I actually requested from the AI agent. Now let's say we're super interested in finding out more about this lead here, James Furman. We can just go and grab his LinkedIn URL and then tell the agent to research this lead and give the actual LinkedIn URL. And then just like that, the agent is going to run again. And after about a minute, the AI agent is going to respond with, the research on James Furman is now complete. Please check your email for the full report. And if I open up my inbox, you can see that 0 minutes ago, we received an email that says James Furman research report. It's got a nice photo of him and his company. And then there's a whole bunch of information, including his information, his company's information, his interests, the similarities between us, different pain points and solutions to those pain points that we can offer as a business, and a whole bunch of other granular information as well. So as you can see, this AI agent is extremely powerful. Imagine pulling out your phone, going on Telegram and recording a voice about what sort of leads you want to generate. And just like that, you'll have a bunch of leads inside an Excel sheet and even reports sent directly to your email. So just before I get into the workflow and show you guys exactly how everything is working under the hood, I wanted to let you guys know that as always, I'm giving away this template for completely free. It's going to be in the link in the description down below. So click on that link. It's going to take you to my free Skool community. Go to the YouTube resources section and look for the video that has the title, which is the same as this video's title. And then just download the template, import it into your own workflow, and follow along with the video to set it up exactly how I've set it up. Now let's not waste any more time and get back to the video. So the lead generation agent that we built is called Lead Generation Joe. As you can see, he's a goofy guy. All you guys have to do is open up messages and then start texting him. So let's just say hi. We'll send that through and then we'll run the AI agent. And as you can see, the AI agent runs and it uses the brain and it responds back to us saying, hi, I'm Lead Generation Joe. What leads can I help you scrape today? Just let me know the locations, business types, and job titles, and I'll take care of the rest. So I've just typed in, please create a list of leads for IT consultants in Toronto, Canada, and New York, United States. So I'll send that through. And then the agent is going to respond back to me saying, could you please specify the job titles you're interested in for these IT consultants? So as you can see, if I don't give enough information, otherwise the locations, business types, and job titles, the AI agent is going to try and clarify with me so it has enough information to actually scrape the lead. So we're just going to respond with founders, please. And if we run the workflow, you can see that this time the brain is actually going to call on the lead scraping workflow. And then the lead scraping workflow is actually going to scrape those leads, put it inside this Google Sheet that has all these different pieces of information. And then it's going to respond back to us saying, done, I've added 5 new contacts for founders of IT consulting firms in Toronto, Canada, and New York, United States. So let's take a look at the lead scraping workflow. As you can see, the AI agent basically sends a query over to this workflow that starts the workflow. And the query is in JSON formatting. So over here, we change it to actual JSON. You can see that it says the location has to be Toronto, Canada, and New York, United States, which is what we asked. And also the business or the business type, or basically the industry, is going to be IT consultants. And the job title is going to be founder. And then what happens is that information goes over to an Apollo scraper or an API that's actually using Apollo in the backend to scrape leads. And then it's scraping a list of leads. So in this instance, it only found 5 leads in these regions for IT consulting firm founders, which is not usual. It usually gets a lot more than that, but I guess it really just depends on what sort of keywords you guys are searching up and also in what regions you're actually searching that up. So in terms of IT consultants in New York and United States, Apollo doesn't really have much information for the actual founders. So that information is then getting manipulated through a bunch of different nodes, and then eventually it's going to Google Sheets where it's getting uploaded. So if we go over here and we go to the very bottom, you can see that we now have 5 IT consultants here, with only 1 of them being in Toronto and the rest of them being in New York in United States. So now let's test out the second capability of the AI agent. Let's say, please research this lead and send me an email with the report. And then you basically just have to chuck in the actual LinkedIn URL of that lead that you want to research. And then let's say we send it through to Lead Gen Joe and we run the workflow. Basically what happens in this instance is the brain decides that it should call on the actual lead research tool. And the lead research tool itself is basically a separate workflow, which, as you guys can see, researches that actual lead and then sends off an email to us with the actual research report for that lead. So let's take a look at the actual lead research workflow. Now, the lead research workflow is a little bit more complex than the other workflow. As you can see, it's separated to 4 different sections. The first part is researching the actual prospect. So every time you send through a LinkedIn URL, that LinkedIn URL gets sent to Relevance AI via API, and then Relevance AI basically just scrapes everything on that person's LinkedIn account, including their LinkedIn posts, all the information on their LinkedIn account, and even their company LinkedIn account. And then that information goes through a bunch of code, which basically just formats it into a nice report. And then using the Perplexity API, we'll do a bunch of research about them online, basically finding any information that exists about them or their company. And then the third API is using Apify to scrape the Trustpilot reviews about that actual lead. And then that information is then getting sent on to a bunch of OpenAI nodes that's going to analyze that information and extract a bunch of valuable information for us. So in this instance, we're looking at creating a summary for that actual person first. So basically just a summary section that goes inside the report. And then we're looking at similarities. So what sort of similarity points do we have with that person? Because using those similarity points, you guys can obviously send some sort of cold outreach email that says like, hey, me and you are both XYZ. And then you can obviously start a conversation and try and convert them that way. And then in the third analysis node, we're basically looking at what sort of pain points that person has, which obviously depends on what sort of business they run, what sort of industry they're in, what sort of job title they have. And then based on those pain points, we're coming up with solutions or opportunities of what we can offer them in order to obviously onboard them as a client. So basically these 3 analysis nodes work really well if you guys are sending out massive cold outreach campaigns and you want to be able to analyze information that you can use inside those cold outreach campaigns. And then in the next node, we'll basically have a generate report node. And in this node, basically all the information is getting put into a HTML report. And then once that HTML report has actually been created, it's getting sent over to us via email. So if I open up my email, you can see that this is the report for the person's LinkedIn URL that we sent through. Their name is Merzena Regurai. I hope I'm not saying that wrong. And then there's basically just a whole bunch of information about them. So as I said, there's a summary section at the top. There is a person summary, which is all the information about them specifically. So for example, they have 12 years of experience in founding and developing companies. They're the founder and president of ATD Technologies. They have expertise in fundraising, business development, modernization management, leading organizations. And then after that, there's a summary section for the actual company itself. So ATD Technology LLC, established in 2012 and based in Lake Grove, New York, is a forward-thinking staffing and recruiting agency committed to diversity and inclusion. So there's a bunch of information there that just by reading that, you'd know everything about their company. And then there's some dot points as to what sort of interests they actually have. So in this case, she has interest in entrepreneurship, talent acquisition, business development, diversity and inclusion, and information technology. And then there's unique facts about this person. Unique facts are really good if you guys are sending out cold emails, because if you can reach out to them mentioning a unique fact about them, obviously that email will feel more personalized and they feel like they have to respond back to you. So in this case, Merzena is not only the founder and president of AT Technology, but also serves as the founder and board member at Tailored Staffing Inc., demonstrating her extensive involvement in staffing industry. And she's also held some leadership positions at other places as well. And then after that, there's a similarity section, which basically just determines the similarities between you and that person. And then there's the opportunity section in the third analysis node, which basically just looks at the pain points that they potentially have. And these pain points are obviously pain points that are related to your product or service. So you obviously change that prompt for it to match your product and service. But in this case, it's Thinking of Me, which is an AI and automation agency. And then in the next column, there's basically evidence as to why the large language model thinks that this is the case. And then there's also a solution, which is basically what we can offer them to fix this pain point. And the solution section is also somewhat replicated down here with automation opportunities, which basically just talks about the different opportunities for automation, or as I said, different opportunities for us to sell them on our service. And then there's a whole bunch of other information, which is more granular, that's actually been extracted from their LinkedIn account, like their name, their headline, the location, the About Us section, the city, the country, the job title, the company description, and a bunch of other stuff. And then usually there's an education section here, which basically just goes through all of the different educational institutions that they've studied at. But in this instance, she doesn't have anything on her LinkedIn, but this usually fills up the table. And there's an experience section here, which is similar to the education section. This one actually looks at the previous job history. So worked at this company, the title in this company was this, the date range was this, and the location was this. And then same for this other company. And then usually there's a section here that says recent LinkedIn posts, which basically just scrapes the last 30 days of posts that they've made on LinkedIn. But in this case, she also hasn't posted any sort of things on LinkedIn. And then I'll just show you guys what this looks like in another research report. So in this instance, it's a research report of myself. So as you can see, that's me, that's my company. That's the information that we just went through. Over here, we have my education, and then we have my experience, which is the places that I've worked. And over here, this is my last 2 most recent LinkedIn posts. So if I had more LinkedIn posts over the past 30 days, it would basically scrape all of those. And then coming back to Mercena, you can see that there's a Google Research Analysis section, which is basically all the research that was found on her company by searching through Google, and the tool used here is Perplexity. And then we have a Trustpilot review section, which is meant to import the negative Trustpilot reviews that they've recently received. So in this case, they don't have any negative Trustpilot reviews. But if I bring up another example and we scroll down, you can see that this person has got a couple of 1-star and 2-star Trustpilot reviews that were created recently. So you can use these Trustpilot reviews to also figure out what sort of pain points they have, and you can actually reach out to them saying, hey, I know you guys got a negative review on this specific thing, and this is how you guys can fix it. This is how we can help you. So if we come back to the actual Google Sheet itself, you can see that for each lead, there's a bunch of information that's being scraped. There's their full name, their email address, the phone number, the location that they're in, which is basically meant to be the city followed by the actual state. And then there's also the industry that they're in, which is basically the business type that we sent through, their company name, their job title inside that company, the seniority level inside that company. So are they founders? In some instances, they might be entry level like this person here, but we haven't really searched up for anyone entry level at this stage. And then there's their website URL and their actual LinkedIn URL. And then at the very end, there's also a column here that is the actual research reports that we've created. So in this instance, this is James Furman, which we just demoed before. And if you go over here, that's the actual research report that we created for James in HTML format. So now let's run through another demo, and then I'm going to show you guys exactly what's happening in every single node. So let's say, hey lead gen Joe, can you please scrape a list of leads for owners of real estate agencies in Sydney, Australia and Auckland, New Zealand. So we'll send that through, and then let's run the workflow. So as you guys can see, basically what happens here is the actual Telegram trigger triggers because a new message has been sent to the actual chatbot. And then in the next node, the workflow decides whether this was a voice message or whether it was a text message. So in this case, it was a voice message, so it went upwards. And then the actual voice file got downloaded from Telegram and it got transcribed. And then once it got transcribed, it got fed to the actual AI agent, which then sent that information over to its brain and decided, okay, well, in this case, we have to call on the lead scraping tool. So then it called on the lead scraping tool. And then it responded back to me saying, done, I've added 28 new contacts for owners of real estate agencies in Sydney, Australia and Auckland, New Zealand. So if we come back to the actual Google Sheet, you can see that it is indeed true. We now have a bunch of leads for owners of real estate agencies that are either in New Zealand or in Australia. So taking a closer look here, the actual first node is the trigger node. Obviously, every automation needs a trigger, which basically just tells the automation, hey, it's time for you to run. And in this case, obviously, the trigger is a message being sent to the bot inside Telegram. So if you guys want to set up this Telegram trigger yourself, obviously the first thing you have to do is create the bot. And then once you create the bot, you have to hook it up to your n8n. Let me show you exactly how to do that. So setting up a bot in Telegram is super easy. All you guys have to do is search up bot father, like Godfather, but for bots. Godfather looking bot comes up, and this is exactly what you want to see. So bot father, this one here. Then you want to send it a message saying start. And once you send that, there's a instruction manual that comes up saying, what do you want to do next? What we want to click on is new bot. And then it's going to say, all right, you want to build a new bot. What are we going to call it? So we're going to call this one lead generation Joe 2.0. So we'll send that through. So that's the name of the bot. And then it's going to say, okay, well, now you have to give me a username. For the username, it has to end with bot. So just keep that in mind. So in this case, let's call it lead _ gen _ Joe _ 2 _ bot. Send that through. And then it's going to say, congratulations, your new bot has now been created. And we don't really care about the rest of this message. You want to click on this me button, and that's going to take you to the actual bot. So if I click on start right now, nothing's going to happen because it's not connected to your n8n account yet. So coming back to the bot father, you can see that it gives you our token to actually access it via API. And that token is this one here. So you click on it and then it's going to copy to clipboard. So then once you've created your bot and you've copied the actual API token to clipboard, you want to come back to your Telegram trigger and you want to click on webhook URLs. And then as you can see, two options come up, the test URL or the production URL. Now, basically what these URLs are, it's basically just a way for your Telegram bot to know where it's meant to send the trigger once that message gets sent through inside Telegram itself. And that's basically this URL here. So it could either be a test URL or production URL. the test URL you want to keep when you're still testing. So if I have test URL, I'd have to manually click on test workflow every single time for the actual workflow to work. But if I were to activate this actual workflow, to click on activate, I would want to be using the actual production URL. And then in that case, I don't actually have to have the workflow open. I can just close my laptop, if anything, just go on my phone and talk to the bot. And then that will run the workflow in the backend and then respond to me. So for the time being, just because I'm going to show you guys how it works, I'm going to keep it as test URL. But once you guys have built it, I would recommend clicking on activate and then going back and changing it to production URL. Cool. So now that we know what the webhook URL is going to be, and we also have access to the actual API key, there's a little bit of code that you guys have to put into some sort of CLI. So I'm going to give you guys access to this code inside the description of this video. So just click on that and you guys will be able to access the code. So you don't have to screenshot it or anything. But basically what you guys want to do is you want to open up some sort of CLI. So in this case, I've opened up terminal. Then you guys would open whatever else. And then you would paste in the actual code that I send you. And then all you have to do is replace these two parameters here. So we've got webhook URL here. And then over here, we've got API key. So the webhook URL will actually replace it with the actual webhook URL from n8n. So in this case, I'm using the test URL. So I just click on copy and then I will paste it here. And then over here, the second parameter, the API key, you'd basically just go back to botfather. You'd copy the actual API key to your clipboard and then you will replace this section here with API key. And then all you have to do is click on enter. And just by doing that, your bot is going to be connected to this n8n workflow. So I'm obviously not going to do that because I've already connected my bot to n8n. But once you guys click that, there's nothing else you have to worry about. The trigger is going to work. So every time you send a new message to your actual bot, it will trigger and the workflow will run in the backend. So then once that trigger comes in or that message comes in, it's going to be one of two different types. Obviously, it's either going to be a voice message or it's going to be a text message. So this next node here, or this if statement, basically just decides whether it is a voice message or a text message. So if it's a voice, it will go up, and if it's a text, it will go down. So in this case, the last message that we sent was indeed a voice. And then the next node is basically just downloading that voice, and that downloaded sort of soundtrack now is sent over to OpenAI to transcribe, to turn that voice into text so we can send it through to the AI agent. So I wouldn't recommend changing anything here. You'd basically just want to add your credentials, which is super simple to do. Basically, you just have to go to OpenAI and get an API key and then pop it in here, which is really easy. And then that message gets sent over to the AI agent itself. So this was text. What would happen is basically that information will come through, then it will get put into a parameter called text, and then that parameter will be sent over to the AI agent. So as you guys can see in the actual AI agent itself, the text comes in as a user message, which is basically just defining what the AI agent needs to do in that very instance. And obviously for this workflow, we're using a tools AI agent, and it's got this nice prompt here. So getting into the prompt has got four main sections. We've got an overview section, a tools section, a rules section, and also an example section. So basically for the overview, we're basically just telling the AI agent what its role is, and we're giving it some context. We're saying you are a lead generation agent responsible for scraping and researching leads. And in the next section, we've got the tools section, which is basically just telling the AI agent what sort of tools it has access to, or basically what sort of capabilities it has. And for each capability, which tool should it be calling? So we've tried to keep it really simple. We've said, use this tool for the lead scraping tool to scrape leads into a Google Sheet. Only call this tool once you have enough information to complete the desired JSON search query. So if we come back and have a look at the actual tool itself, you can see that the tool is basically just a n8n workflow that's been connected. So if you guys want to add more tools, you just click on this plus button and then you'll click on call n8n workflow tool. And then you would obviously go and build an n8n workflow, and then you would just choose it from this drop down menu here. And then just like that, your AI agent will have access to that actual tool. So deleting that one. For the actual lead scraping tool, what we have is two sections. Obviously, we've got the name of the lead scraping tool. I like to make the actual names for the tools descriptive of what that actual tool is meant to achieve, because obviously by doing that, it removes all sort of uncertainty for the AI agent as to what that tool exactly is and when it should use it. So then the second thing we have to define inside a tool is the actual description of that tool. Inside the description of that tool, it's really twofold. The first thing you have to do is basically just say when the AI agent is meant to use that tool, or basically what that tool is used for. So call this tool to scrape leads once you have enough details about the search query. Kind of replicated the same thing I said inside the actual prompt. You don't necessarily have to replicate it. And then the second thing you want to say in the description is you want to tell the AI agent what sort of input format it should give to this tool. So for the agent to be able to communicate well with this actual tool, it would have to send through a JSON formatted query, which includes these three arrays. So the first array is the location array, And it basically just has the different locations that that person says inside the prompt. And a really important thing here is that we've replaced all the spaces with pluses, so plus and plus. And then for the business, it's the same sort of thing. So business 1 here, business 2 here. And then for the job titles, it's also the same thing. So then coming back to the actual AI agent, you can see that the second tool that we've defined is the lead research tool. And I've told the AI agent that it's meant to use this tool to research a lead by using the LinkedIn URL. So if we take a look at the second tool, it's also another n8n workflow that we've connected, as I showed you guys before. So the name of this tool is the lead research tool, which is also descriptive. And then for the actual description, we've said you should call this tool to research lead. The input they should give should be the LinkedIn URL, and the actual JSON formatting for the input should be this format here. So now that the AI agent knows what tools it has access to and how it's meant to use them, we basically give the AI agent a bunch of rules to define how we want that AI agent to actually behave. So first rule is to ask clarifying questions if you're unsure about something. And the second rule is to ask questions to gather enough information to actually satisfy the query for each of the tools. And we saw that one before when the AI agent basically asked us to clarify exactly what job titles we want to use. And then the next rule is telling the AI agent it's meant to introduce itself as lead generation Joe. And then the next one's basically just saying that thing about the spaces and the plus. So replace all the spaces with plus. And then I'm just reinforcing a couple of things to make sure that the AI agent is robust in how it acts. So depending on whether you guys want to add more things to this lead generation agent, you'd also add more rules and also add more tools to define that behavior and make sure that the AI agent doesn't like stray away from it, if that makes sense. And then at the very end, we have an example, which basically just is an example of an interaction with the AI agent. So in this scenario, it's basically an example where an interaction with the AI agent to basically tell the AI agent how it's meant to handle different situations. So in this situation, we said, hi, the AI agent said, hi, I'm Lead Gen Joe. What can I do for you? These are the information that you have to give me. And then I basically just gave it a specific request. I said, I'm looking for Chicago, United States, Sydney, Australia, and financial planners. And then Lead Gen Joe said, awesome, I think you forgot the job title. So basically clarified to make sure it has enough details. And then I said, only CEOs, please. And then what Lead Gen Joe did is that it basically called on the lead scrape tool with this JSON formatting here. And then the tool responded to it saying, we've added 25 new contacts to the Google Sheet. And then Lead Gen Joe used that response to respond to us. So this is basically just like an example of an ideal situation of how a certain scenario should be handled by Lead Gen Joe. So then Lead Gen Joe is obviously connected to a simple memory, and that's basically just allowing the AI agent to be able to remember previous conversations or previous messages. In this case, we want the AI agent to remember 10 previous messages that's been sent through. And we've defined the actual key of that memory to be the same as the chat ID of the actual Telegram chat. So if we were to open up a new chat, that 10 will kind of refresh. But if we're still in one chat, it's going to remember the last 10 messages inside that specific chat. And obviously, as always, the AI agent is connected to a brain. And in this case, we're just using GPT-4o. So then once the lead gen agent gets a response back, whether from the brain or from the actual tools or the workflows itself, it will send that response back to us in Telegram. So if it's an error, it's going to send an error response saying whatever the error was or why ever the tools didn't work. So you guys can come back and try and figure out what was wrong there and solve that edge case. Or if it was a success, it will basically just return the actual output from that tool or the brain back to us inside Telegram. And that's what we see on the actual chat interface when the bot responds to us. So taking a closer look at the actual lead scraping workflow, you can see that the first trigger that we have is a when executed by another workflow trigger. And the when executed by another workflow trigger basically just tells the automation or the workflow that it should run when another workflow calls upon it. So as you can see, the input that came in from the other workflow or the AI agent was the actual query itself. And if we go back to the actual lead agent itself and go to logs and click on lead scraping, you can see that indeed a query was sent over with the location, business, and job title arrays, and that's reflected here. So then in the next node, once that information comes in, it's being converted into proper JSON formatting. So as you can see, now we have location Sydney, Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand, and the business type is real estate agencies, and the job title is the owners of real estate agencies. And then that information is going through a bunch of custom JavaScript code, which is converting that information to a URL so we can scrape that URL from Apollo. So if I basically grab this and click on copy and then paste it into Google, you can see that once it runs, Apollo would come up. And inside Apollo, that specific search is being pre-populated. So real estate agencies, we're looking at owners, and we're looking at Sydney, Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand. So then this page is what we're basically scraping in order to be able to grab information about those leads to put inside the Excel sheet. So to do this, what I've had to do is I've had to basically analyze the URL that Apollo has and figure out how we can convert a certain search query to a certain URL, because obviously the URL isn't just as simple as saying business, this, location, this, yada, 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 and it looks pretty confusing here. So I wouldn't really recommend changing this code. If you guys decide to change the actual parameters inside the query to have more things than just location, business, and job title, you'd probably need to come back to Apollo, add that specific thing to the left-hand side, and then see how the URL changes, and then update that code to account for that change inside your actual workflow, if that makes sense. Now, if you guys don't know how to code, you don't have to necessarily worry about it. You can just ask ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will be more than capable of analyzing it and giving you this custom code that will convert the query to a URL for you to scrape. So then once that URL has been created, it's actually being sent over to a HTTP request node, which is making an API call to a tool on Appify in order to scrape that actual URL itself. So you guys wouldn't necessarily need to change anything in this HTTP request node. The only thing you'd have to change is your URL and also the actual API key itself in the HTTP request node. So you guys want to open up your Appify account. Now, if you guys don't have an Appify account, it's basically very simple to make one. And they also give you $5 of free credits per month. So Appify is really good. Depending on how many leads you guys want to scrape, you might not even have to pay Appify. But if you guys do decide to buy an Appify subscription, you can put code 20KYRGYZM, which is 20 followed by my name, in as a promo code, and you guys will get 20% off. And I'll get a little kickback on it as well. So then once you're in Appify, you basically just want to click on Appify Store and then look for Apollo scrapers. And a whole bunch of different Apollo scrapers will come up. The one that you want to click on is the one that says up to 50K leads. This one's the cheapest one, probably the one that I would recommend for you guys to use. So basically just click on this one. You want to click on save, so then you can refer back to it later if you'd like to. And then all you have to do to connect it to your n8n account is basically just click on API and then click on API endpoints. Look for the one that says run actor synchronously and get dataset items. Click on copy to clipboard, come back to n8n, replace the actual URL. And then as you can see at the very end, it would say token equals to, and it would have your actual API key there. So you can literally just keep it like that and remove this API key in the query parameters if you want to. But if you want to set it up like how I've set it up, you can basically just copy that, bring it down here, paste it in, keep token as the name, and then for the actual API key, bring it down to the actual value. Now I've removed my API key and I've just kept this anonymous sort of parameter so you guys don't have access to my API key, but for you, you'd be able to see your API key here at the end. So then coming down to the actual request that we're sending through to Appify, we're basically saying that we want to get personal emails, although I haven't actually put it inside the Google Sheets. We want to get work emails and we want a total records of 500. Now this specific Appify tool needs you to give a total records number of minimum 500. Which basically means if there is 500 leads to be scraped, there will be scraped. But in scenarios like what we saw before, if there's only 5 or 10 or 20 leads that Apollo can find, then in that case, it would only scrape those 5 to, let's say, 20 leads. And then the last parameter, which is the most important one, is the actual URL that we're trying to search on Apollo to scrape those leads. So it is worth mentioning that there is also another Appify API that you guys can use, or a different tool. It's this one here that's called Apollo Scraper Unlimited No Cookie 75 cents per 1,000 by Supreme Coder. There is pros and cons to either of these tools. The reason why you might want to use this tool is that this tool gives you a couple of additional parameters compared to the other tool. So this one also gives you number of employees, I think from memory, and also it gives you a couple of other minor things that you can add into the Google Sheets if you'd like. But the problem with this Appify tool is that unless you have a paid Apollo account, it's only going to scrape 25 leads per request. So not 500, not 1,000. Every time you send that request, it can only take 25 leads. But it is cheaper per 1,000. So it's really up to you guys. If you want to save money, it might be worthwhile to use this Apollo tool instead of the other one. So moving on, we can see that the Apollo scraper pulled in 28 leads. In the next node, what we're doing is we're extracting all the important pieces of information from the actual Apollo API output. So there's a whole bunch of different parameters that Appify tool will give us. We don't really care about everything, or at least I don't really care about everything. So I'm just extracting the ones that I care about, which is their full name email address, LinkedIn URL, seniority level, job title, company name, location, country, their phone number, website URL, and their business industry. So it's really up to you guys. If you want to add more of these parameters, you can literally just click on that drag and input fields, put a name for that parameter. Let's say height. Imagine if you wanted to get the person's height. And then you would drag in whatever parameter is equal to that person's height. But we're not going to do that for this instance. And as you guys can see, for this number one, it looks like it's a really complicated piece of JSON variable code that I have here. But basically what this is doing is it's just saying if there is a number, then pull in the number. If there is no number, then just say that it's null. And we've had to do this to make sure that the workflow doesn't break, because a lot of people don't actually have their numbers on Apollo. In this instance, this person didn't even have their email address on Apollo, probably because they're a real estate agent. But for a lot of people, probably 99% of leads that you scrape, they will have an email address. So then once that information comes in, there is this really cool node that basically removes all the duplicates. Not duplicates inside these 28 items, but it removes all the duplicates from previous executions. So let's say if you guys are searching up real estate agencies in Sydney. I know Sydney and stuff because I'm from Australia. I don't really know the United States, but let's say if you guys search up Sydney and then you want to search up Melbourne and then you want to search up, let's say Perth, which is 3 different places inside Australia, you might get some duplicates depending on how Apollo would show that data. And then this node over here basically just checks the items that came in from this execution against the other executions and removes the ones that are repetitive. So it doesn't double add it to the actual Google Sheet node. Now, with that being said, I really wanted to put this node in just to show you guys what it does. But you really didn't need this node, because in the next node, we're actually uploading this to Google Sheet. And what we have here is an append or update row node. And basically what this means is that it will look through the actual Google Sheet itself and it will match each item from the previous node to the rows inside the Google Sheet. So let's say, for example, if inside the Google Sheet there is a LinkedIn URL that is Kevin Collins, then it will match it to that specific row and it will update that row as opposed to add a duplicate row at the very end, if that makes sense. So to connect yourself to Google Sheets, it's also very simple. You want to click on create new credential and then you just want to sign in, which is really simple and straightforward. And then you can choose which column you want to match on. I would probably say LinkedIn URL is the best because it's the hardest for the LinkedIn URL to be the same across any two people. Like, I don't think it will ever happen. And then I've just uploaded each of those data points from the previous node into the actual Google Sheet itself. So feel free to add more columns to the actual Google Sheet if you'd like, and then also pull it in from the previous node to upload it to that column from n8n. So in the next node, what I've done is I've basically just defined a new parameter that is pulling in the length of the previous node's items, or basically how many items is in the previous node. And then it's saying this length, new contacts, has been added to Google Sheets. So basically, let's say if we've scraped 500 different people or different leads, the length or the number of items in the previous node would be 500, and it will say 500 new contacts has been added to the Google Sheet. Now, because there's 28 items coming through, this would also output 28 different parameters saying the same exact thing. So in the next node, I've basically just limited that down to one single parameter, which is going to say output 28 new contacts have been added to the Google Sheet. And then that output is going to be sent back to your AI agent once the workflow runs successfully. So your AI agent knows that the workflow actually worked and how many leads were uploaded. So if we come back here, you can see that the output from the lead scraping workflow was indeed 28 new contacts have been added to the Google Sheet. And then based on that information, the AI agent responded to us saying, done, I've added 28 new contacts for owners of real estate agencies in Sydney, Australia and Auckland, New Zealand. Let me know if there's anything else that I can assist you with. And then at the very end, obviously that's being uploaded to the memory so the AI agent can remember that for the next messages inside the conversation. So now let's quickly work through the lead research workflow. If we come back to the Google Sheets, let's just grab someone's LinkedIn URL. Let's say Clarissa Yao. She runs a marketing agency in the United Kingdom. So let's just grab her LinkedIn URL. And then actually we can test the agent here. Let's see what her name was. So Clarissa Yao. Let's grab her name. Let's say, please research Clarissa Yao. So we'll send it through. We'll run the agent. Agent will respond saying, can you please provide me with the LinkedIn URL for Clarissa Yao? So this goes back to the actual system message or the prompt that we defined for the agent. We said to always make sure you have enough information and always clarify things if you're not 100%. So in this case, we'll paste in the LinkedIn URL, we'll send it through, we'll run the agent again. And as you guys can see, this time it goes to the brain and the brain decides that, hey, I got to call onto the lead research workflow so I can actually research this person. So then coming back to Telegram, you can see that the AI agent says that they've created a research report on Clarissa Yao, which is sent to my email. So before we check out the actual research report itself, I'm going to quickly take you guys through the actual research report workflow. Again, the query is coming in, but in this instance, there's not multiple different objects or multiple different arrays. So there's no need to try and reconvert it into JSON formatting. In this case, it's already in JSON formatting. So that's perfect. And then moving on, basically what's happening here is we're grabbing that LinkedIn URL and we're sending it via an API request to a relevance AI tool to scrape all the information on Clarissa's LinkedIn account. So as you can see, the result of that is all of these different parameters. We've got the about section, the company section, the company website, educations, experience, all the different stuff that would be on someone's LinkedIn profile. Now, setting this up for yourself is also extremely simple. You basically just want to open up your Relevance AI account. Now, if you guys don't have a Relevance AI account, it's very simple to make one. Just search up Relevance AI and then create yourself a free account. So then you want to go to the tools section, which is going to be on the left-hand menu bar. And then once you choose the tools section, so I'm already on the tools section, you want to click on this import button. And then once you click on this import button, you basically just want to import the tool that I give you guys access to inside my free Skool community. So basically you'd import the tool, and once you import it, you'd see something like this, which would basically say LinkedIn Research Tool. You want to just click on that tool. And then once you click on that tool, you can see how it's actually been set up. You don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is go and click on Use, then go and click on API. And then over here, you basically want to just grab the API information so that you can connect n8n to your instance of this tool. So the first thing you want to do is you want to basically just copy the actual URL itself. You want to come to the lead research tool and paste it in as the URL. And then you want to go and click on generate API key. And then you want to copy that API key, come back to the n8n workflow and replace the value of this authorization section or this authorization parameter with your actual API key. So I just realized that I gave you guys access to both my API keys. So I'm going to be changing that, but yeah, just basically paste in your API key here. And then there is a body that we're sending over with this request. And this body has two parameters. One of them is the LinkedIn URL, which is obviously what we're using to scrape. And then one of them is saying how many days of post do we want to scrape. So in this case, we're scraping 30 days of post. But if you guys want to scrape 100 days, you can change it to 100. If you want to scrape only 5 days, you can change it to 5. Really up to you. So then once that information comes in, there's 3 separate code nodes that's basically just certain parts of that information. And they're creating a HTML section that's going to go inside the final report. So this one's creating the experiences table. This one is creating the education table. You guys don't have to mess around with this, just leave it as it is. And then after that, we're basically using another API request, but this time the API request is being sent over to Perplexity. And we're basically just trying to research the company of that specific prospect using all the information that's available publicly online, like their website and any sort of press or any other sort of articles about them online. So then to do this, you obviously want to connect yourself to Perplexity. Connecting to Perplexity is also very easy. You basically just want to open up Perplexity. You can see that I was asking about hotkeys. And then you can click on this settings, and then you want to click on API and put in some credits, and you'll have your API key at the bottom there. So then coming back here, if you guys don't want to use Perplexity, you could also just use GPT-4o search, GPT-4o search preview, or even GPT-4o search preview mini, which is a lot cheaper than Perplexity. Really up to you guys. And then we just have a prompt here that we're saying you are a researcher in a business development team. Your job is to find as much research as you can about a prospect company. And then I've basically just told it what company it's meant to be searching up. So I've grabbed the name from the previous note. So I'd said Sinowave or Sinowave in this case, and also the actual website. So it 100% knows exactly what company it's meant to research about online. So then once that information comes from Perplexity, it's been sent to another code node, which is reformatting the actual URLs or the citation links, or basically where the information's been scraped from, which is also going into the final report. And then over here, we're making another API request to an Apify tool. This one's called Trustpilot Reviews. And basically what it does is it scrape negative Trustpilot reviews for a certain person. And so to set that one up, you guys want to obviously come back to Apify, click on Apify Store, and then search up for Trustpilot reviews. And then you want to look for the one with the fire emoji from Nikita. You want to click on that one. As I said, you want to save it for yourselves. And then all you have to do, as I said before as well, you want to just click on API, go to API endpoints, scroll down to the one that says run acts asynchronously and get dataset items, click on copy, come back to the workflow and replace this URL with the URL that you copied in. And then you don't even need a authentication type. You don't need to authorize. You basically have already authorized using the actual URL because it's going to give you the token at the very end of the URL like before. So then we also are sending a body with this actual request. The body has a couple of parameters in this instance. First one's the company domain, which is basically just saying what company are we looking for reviews for. That was not proper English, but you get what I mean. And then we have basically another couple of parameters. So this one's saying how many reviews are we scraping. So in this case, we're scraping the 5 most recent reviews. And these reviews are going to be the 5 most recent reviews that are 1, 2, or 3 star. And then basically just defining that we want to start from page number 1, and we don't necessarily need reviews that are verified, or we don't necessarily need reviews that have replies against them. So basically this API request is going to try pull those Trustpilot reviews, but in a lot of instances, if the company isn't super huge, they're not going to have any Trustpilot reviews. So you might get a 400 error code. In this instance, what we've done is we've defined that if we do get an error code, you should just continue anyway, so it doesn't break the workflow there. So then that information is being sent over to a code node that's meant to put those reviews in a nice format. Now in this instance, there was no Trustpilot reviews, so there's not really much inside this HTML code. And then in the next section, we just have the analysis section, which obviously inside this section, we're trying to analyze that information so we can extract insights that's going to help us run our cold email campaign or cold DM campaign or whatever we're trying to use that information for. So in this instance, I have 3 nodes. The first one is basically just summarizing all the information about that person and then summarizing all the information about that company. I'm not going to go through the actual prompt, but as I said, I'm going to give you guys access to this workflow. So feel free to read through the prompt yourself. And I would just recommend changing each of these prompts to suit your actual use case. For example, in this instance, it's obviously starting with you are part of the business development team at Chemexa, which is an AI consultancy, which is my company, not yours. So you'd want to change that to your business. And then you'd want to change whatever other specific information there is about my business or my use case to whatever information you want for your use case. So then in the next node, we have a similarities node. In this node is trying to identify the similarities between me and the actual person. And the reason why I like to do this is because in cold email campaigns and even in consultations, it's really good to know what you guys have in common before you jump on a call, because a lot of times when 2 people are either meeting for the first time or you're sending an email to someone for the first time, like there is a certain barrier or a certain ice of like, I don't know who you are. And if you guys have something to connect on, then obviously that's really good because it will allow that sort of ice to be broken and that barrier to be broken. And but obviously you can change this to your own use case. But basically knowing what sort of similarities you have with a certain prospect will help break that barrier and make that whole interaction smoother. But feel free to change it if you guys don't want to know about similarities. And then in the next node, we have pain points and solutions, which is the most important part of the actual analysis itself. It's basically saying, this is the prospect, this is my company, figure out what sort of pain points they have, figure out how I can solve those pain points and onboard them as a client. But yet again, this is all based on my business and my products and my services and my tactics. So I'd recommend reading through this and changing the parts that doesn't apply to you so you can obviously tweak it for your own business. But I'll definitely recommend keeping this pain points and solutions node here as well. And then if you guys want to add more analysis sections, feel free to just add that afterwards here. And then we have the create report section where all of this information is being put into a nicely structured report. So that is Clarissa, and that's her company. And then that's the whole information that we have gathered from her inside that report. This is obviously in just HTML code. There's these different sections that I've imported from the previous node. So if you guys do decide to add any nodes to this actual workflow, you'd basically just add little sections into this HTML template, and then you'd basically just pull in that data, if that makes sense. So I'd probably recommend you guys keep it as it is, but if you want to add more, feel free to. At least you change this name. This one's called Consultant Research Report. You want to change it to whatever research report, whatever reason you guys have for creating these research reports. And then once that HTML report is created, it's being sent off as an email. So you guys want to obviously just connect your own email here. And then you also want to define what email address you want to send it to. So in this instance, I'm sending it to myself, but you would probably want to send it to your own email address. And then there's a subject line for that email, which in this instance is just her name, plus research report at the very end. And we're just saying that the actual email content is being sent over as HTML because we've created the HTML report. We've just pulled that one in here as well. Report gets sent off to your email. So coming back to my email, you can see that I have indeed received a research report for Clarissa. That's all the information. So that's her personal summary, that's her company summary, that's her interest, that's unique facts, that's our similarities, and the other information that I talked about before as well. So then coming back here, once that research has been sent to you via email, it's also being uploaded to the Google Sheets document. And obviously for this, we just have the append or update row again, because we don't want to add it to the end every single time. We want to update the rows because it's usually people that we've already scraped and added to the Google Sheet before. We're matching it based on LinkedIn URL again. We're leaving all the other columns empty, and then we're just adding the research report to the final column so that if we come take a look at Clarissa inside our actual lead agent Google Sheet document, you can see that at the very end, we now have the actual research report as well. So if you guys want to use this for any use case like cold email or cold DM or whatever, you can grab that research report and put it inside your own workflow to say, hey, this is the research report that we have. Use this research report to create an email that will do X, Y, and Z. So then just like that, we're able to build a very cost-efficient lead generation and lead research AI agent called Lead Gen Joe. And as I said, I'm going to give you guys access to all of the templates for Lead Gen Joe in the description down below. So feel free to go to my free Skool community and just download it, import it into your own workflow, and tweak it however you'd like. Now, as always, if you guys found this video useful, I would appreciate it if you guys like and subscribe and let me know in the comments down below. But otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.